Emergency funds should pass the laser test. In this episode, I'm going to address the question, where is the best place to put your emergency fund? Well, the laser test I will share with you is the determining factor or factors where I put any of my serious cash. And emergency funds are very serious places where you should have money where it's liquid, where it will be there when you need it. So get ready. I'm going to share with you some insights that maybe you didn't even know about or opportunities that you didn't know existed before. So for more than 4.5 decades, I've helped people as a financial strategist and a retirement planning specialist choose investments that pass the laser test. It's an acronym that I came up with years ago. Laser means liquid assets safely earning returns. It spells laser. And in fact, my favorite vehicle I have called the Laser Fund, because it passes the laser test with flying colors compared to where most Americans put their money. So let's talk about laser, how you can sort of give a score. You can score any investment based upon these criteria. There are 4, and we're talking about liquidity, safety, rate of return, and tax benefits. So we're going to assume that you can score any investment or place where you put your money on a scale of 0 up to 10 as far as where they would rank with liquidity, the ability to access your money when you need it with an electronic funds transfer or phone call, safety of the institution and safety of the principal, the rate of return you're earning, and also are there any tax benefits, which makes a huge difference in the long-term accumulation of that money. So unfortunately, a lot of places where Americans put their money only score maybe 18 to 22 out of a possible 40 points. If you have 4 criteria, liquidity, safety, rate of return, and tax benefits, the highest score would be 10, a perfect 10 in each of those 4. That would be 40. Most investments only score maybe half, maybe 18 to 22. My favorite vehicle, the Laser Fund, scores between 34 and 36, depending upon how you structure it. Nothing else comes close. So let's go through each of these. Liquidity is number 1. I rank them in this order on purpose. You know, I found that when people have an emergency, they have a financial setback or a pandemic, they lose their job or they get sick, this is where they need to access their money. Liquidity is number 1. Money in an IRA or 401k is not liquid without incurring 10% penalties from the IRS. Maybe when the emergency happens, it's because the market dropped and people don't want to sell their mutual fund shares or liquidate their IRAs or 401ks and have to pay tax, plus sell it at a value which is 30 or 40% less than it was just a month earlier, like in the year 2020. From February to March, many people's IRAs and 401ks in the market dropped 33%. People go, I don't want to sell until it comes back. Liquidity is extremely important. Now, if you have money in a bank or a credit union, you might get a liquid score of 9 or 10 because a bank has a drive-up window? That's actually more convenience. Do you know a bank or credit union, if push comes to shove, could say, sorry, you cannot have your savings, you cannot have money out of your checking account? Wait a minute, I thought it was called a demand deposit. You can demand money anytime. If a bank needed to, they could tell you sorry for up to 6 months. Did you know that? So they haven't ever done that since maybe the run on the banks back in the Great Depression when banks closed and 40% never reopened again. But generally speaking, banks might score 9 or 10 in liquidity. But most places where people have money, the liquidity test is only 1 or 2 or 3 because you cannot access your money without incurring penalties or taxes or things like that. Now, we go to the next one, which is safety. Now, I'm talking about safety of the institution. Some people think banks and credit unions, they're very safe. They're insured by FDIC. Well, yeah, the bank has to pay an insurance premium, but if that's not sufficient, the government runs out of money. They did when they bailed out the savings and loans, and they also did in 2008, but See, the government has the ability to tax people, raise taxes, and print more money. And so, people think, well, I think the money's fairly safe in a bank or a credit union. Well, I think there's safer places to put money. Guess which industry, which financial institutions weathered the Great Depression with flying colors? When banks went under and only 60% came back into business, some real estate dropped 80%. The multi-trillion-dollar legal reserve insurance industry came through with flying colors in the Great Depression. Not one single legal reserve insurance company went under. They came through paying 2.5%, 3.5% during that time period. Same thing happened in 2008 when 400 banks went under. 900 more were on the watch list. Guess how many legal reserve insurance companies went under in 2008? Zero, okay? In fact, the federal government asked the 5 major banks in America to disclose where they had their tier 1 assets. That's money they have to have on hand, liquid and safe in the event of an emergency. Their emergency is a run on the bank. Everybody wanted their money all at once. Guess where they had 30 to 40% of their tier 1 assets? In insurance companies. Banks borrow our money. We put money in a bank, they pay us 1%. And they turn around and put 30 to 40% of their tier 1 assets into insurance companies and earn 4 or 5%. They're making 5%, they're paying you 1. They make 50 grand on every million that they put in the insurance company, and they only have to pay 10,000 to get your money, and you can bypass the middleman. That's why my laser fund, I just bypass the middleman. Why would I put my money in a bank and only earn 1 when I can be earning 5? And actually, the insurance companies are usually ranked 6 notches higher in safety. A lot of banks are only rated BBB. Do you know that is 6 notches down from AAA? And so why not increase the safety by putting your money into the last domino that would fall if the entire financial system collapsed in America? That would be the insurance industry. One insurance company where I put my money manages about $3 trillion, which is as much as the IRS collects in taxes in an entire year. One insurance company. They're huge. And so this is not only the backbone of America, but the backbone of the world. So this is where banks increase their safety and their rate of return, which goes to the next criteria, rate of return. Why would you put your money in a bank or credit union? Because it has a drive-up window. When you could access your money with an electronic funds transfer or a phone call, especially in a crisis, out of a legal reserve insurance company, and you can be earning 500% more. People say, you're earning 500% rates of return? No, you're earning 5 times what banks are paying. Banks pay you 1. An insurance company can pay you 5. I've actually earned more like 8 to 10% by linking to an index. How much better is 5 than 1? It's 50 grand instead of 10 grand. That's 5 times. That's 500% more money. So banks and credit unions may be liquid. They may be convenient. They may be fairly safe, not as safe as insurance companies, but they fail miserably on rate of return. You take the last criteria, and that's tax benefits. The reason why I put my serious cash in a laser fund is because it's totally tax-free. It's one of the very few vehicles in the Internal Revenue Code that allows me to accumulate my money totally tax-free. I can access my money without triggering tax. It's tax-free. When I die, it blossoms and transfers tax-free. When I say that, people say, what do you mean blossom? Every million that I would have in a portfolio of laser funds, if I died tomorrow in an accident, would blossom to about 2.5 million and transfer income tax-free to my wife, my kids, my favorite charities. People say, well, how much does that cost? Nothing's free, but it doesn't cost me anything. It's being paid for with a minuscule portion of interest you would pay out in unnecessary income tax if you had your money in a bank, because these are tax-free. Even money in a bank earning 1% is subject to tax. You're not really earning 1. You're earning less than that. So when you take into consideration liquidity, safety, rate of return, and tax benefits, the laser fund passes with flying colors. You will end up with a 34 to 36 score out of a possible 40. Whereas mutual funds, IRAs, 401ks, stocks, real estate's not liquid. When you really need the money, you can't access it unless you sell it, and you have to be able to sell it, or you have to be able to borrow the money out of the real estate. And when you need it, the worst is the hardest to get if you can't qualify. So money in real estate is not liquid. When you look at any other investment, and in my book, Laser Fund, the Laser Fund comes through and scores at 34, 35, 36 out of a possible 40 points. Real estate, banks, credit unions, mutual funds, IRAs, 401ks, you name it, they're generally down around 16, 18, 20, 22%. So why not dramatically increase the liquidity, safety, rate of return, and tax benefits on your emergency fund? It's just as liquid. It's actually more safe, and you can access the money and you don't trigger tax, and you can earn rates of return more like 6 to 10% instead of the banks only paying 1%. So what's the takeaway? Well, if you want to have an emergency fund that passes the laser test, liquidity, safety, predictable rates of return that historically have beaten inflation, you can't be in a bank rowing upstream at 1 mile an hour, 1% interest when the current of inflation is coming down at 3. You're going backwards. And then also tax-free accumulation. I would recommend you consider the Laser Fund. This is my suggestion here. The Laser Fund is my most recent book. It's book number 11. It's 300 pages, and it's actually 2 books in one. This book is about 200 pages, 14 chapters with all kinds of charts and graphs of how this works, how you comply with this in the Internal Revenue Code to make sure it's tax-free. But if you learn better by stories, you flip it over. And this is about 100 pages, 12 chapters with 62 actual client stories. One of the chapters on this side is how the Laser Fund is the ideal solution for an emergency fund. And so if you want to claim your free copy, it retails for $20, but I'll gift one to you absolutely free. You go to Laser Fund, LASER fund.com, and if you'll contribute $5.95 towards the shipping and handling, I'll cover the rest, and I will pay for the book. You can learn by reading, and also with this channel, if you watch this episode or type in questions, you'll be able to see other educational videos where I talk about the dynamics of the Laser Fund and why it's the superior vehicle, not only for emergency funds, but for retirement, college funding, business working capital, on and on.